Final Fantasy. You guys know how it is, man. I have been screaming from the rooftops for years. I have been essentially fanboying out over Final Fantasy for a long time. There is so much that goes into this brand, this franchise that I really enjoy. And when I hear about the potential of Final Fantasy games coming to Xbox, I love that shit. What's going on, you guys? Gaming out here coming to the video today. We'll be talking about the potential that Final Fantasy 16 is coming to Xbox. Now, you guys know generally how it's went the past few years is, especially 16. I've been very vocal about these games coming out for Xbox because even though that some of you might not enjoy that brand, enjoy that type of combat, especially like the turn-based, because a lot of people don't like turn-based, it is really important for these games to be on the brand, to be on the platform, because it looks worse when they're not there. We have a lot of examples the past, few years of games just missing Xbox entirely. And unfortunately, Final Fantasy is one of them. Now, we know in terms of Square Enix, there's been a really weird conversation when it comes to Square Enix and Xbox. And it seems somewhere midway through the Xbox One generation, they got way better on getting not only modern Final Fantasies on Xbox, like 13. Well, that was during the 360. But then they also got the past ones like 10, 9, 8, 7. And not only that, but they came to Game Pass as well. For the longest time, we were looking for Final Fantasy 14. Maybe not me specifically, because I love generally the main entries of Final Fantasy, not necessarily the MMO aspect. But I know the MMO of Final Fantasy makes them so much money, it's unreal. And that's usually what the majority of the profit they have every quarter are. Now, look, it's not a question on whether or not 16 was a good game, because in my opinion, a lot of the core aspects that made Final Fantasy was missing from 16. But I would say that this is one of the games that would appeal to a different type of audience, not necessarily isolating the Final Fantasy audience, but not necessarily wanting them to play either, but still opening up the brand to a different demographic that wouldn't normally play Final Fantasy games because of the way that the game was actually made. It was a lot more action-paced than, the RPG stuff in general. Do I think it worked out for them? I don't know. My history of covering the industry, usually when you try to appeal to more of an audience that you're not necessarily appealing to, you're going to upset the people that's been there for you since day one. And if you don't get that audience that you want and you upset the hardcore to the point where they're not going to buy the game, a lot of the time it doesn't work out for them. I don't know if 16 was one of those incidences. We all know how Square Enix be rolling. Square Enix be the biggest people in the industry where everyone feels like a game was successful, and then Square Enix comes out of nowhere saying that it wasn't. So we don't know if 16 was successful on their metrics, or maybe it just had unrealistic expectations. There was a lot of PlayStation, reporting going on that not only but PlayStation, but also Square Enix was not happy with the sales of 16. It wasn't a next-gen only game, well, current gen at this point, only on PlayStation 5. So I can understand that perspective. So when it comes to that game, I think Square Enix is definitely more open to negotiating putting that game on Xbox and PC because of the sales they feel like it didn't generate only on PlayStation. So obviously we got 14. The question is just because we got 14, is that enough leeway from them, enough room where they've grown with Square Enix that they would put something like a 16 on the Xbox? And I think it is. Generally in the past, Sony was able to negotiate with Square Enix to either get timed exclusives on games or push back timed exclusives when, it was supposed to come to another platform. they've done it in the past. But I do think Final Fantasy 16 is one of those games where I don't think PlayStation's going to fight. I don't think PlayStation's going to fight for this. Let's go over here to Nate Drake. He's over here on, I believe it's Reset Era, or, I don't know. But he's a relatively popular insider that generally gets stuff right. And it looks like what he's saying here is someone said, if more Xbox games are going over, I think it's only fair Final Fantasy comes back in. I've already played them on the PlayStation, but it's not fair when Xbox is losing exclusives and all the fans want in return is Final Fantasy 16. I'm just going to say this. I'm going to say this out loud. Who said all the fans want this? Look, I'm not going to say it's like a horrible game or it's like the worst game in the world, but in terms of Final Fantasy, I think more people are leaning towards Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think those are the games that's not on Xbox that people want on Xbox. I would look a little bit towards Dragon Quest 12 too. We should really be pushing for that game to be a multi-plat simultaneous release on all platforms. And maybe even a Game Pass bag. Put in the comment section below if you guys think that would actually work. Putting, Dragon Quest 12 in Game Pass day and date. I know that that's an expensive if, but I feel like that is an if that is worth the squeeze. If Microsoft is able to make that for a reasonable price, now obviously if they come out and say, I want $200 billion, then probably don't do it. But if you can get a good price, I do think it would look really good on terms of JRPGs to have something of this caliber known as Dragon Quest 12 on the platform. But when it comes to Final Fantasy 16, yeah, that's coming, guys. There's no denying that. 16 was a commercial, disappointment to almost everyone involved. The Final Fantasy 16, I don't know what it sold on Xbox, PlayStation, but keep in mind, no one really bragged about those sales either. Usually, PlayStation got no problem bragging about the games that hit off. They might have said some early quotes numbers, but you look at maybe Final Fantasy in general is falling off because Rebirth didn't sell as much as Remake, but I do think we can't really take those numbers into consideration because Remake was released during the pandemic and Rebirth wasn't. I do believe that there's a lot more people that was enticed to stay around and play games when they're locked up in their mom's basement. But you guys, it's a joke. But I think there's a lot of stuff goes on here. 16 makes a lot of sense. I'm just curious what happens after that because we need that Remake and Rebirth. Xbox needs more of these Japan games, and I think having 16 come out, especially after they say Tango Studio found a buyer for them. They're doing more over there in Japan, but I feel like it's back steps, and now they're just retracing where they came. I don't think they're any better than where they were 2 years ago. I think the height of Japan was 2 or 3 years ago because they're not at Tokyo Game Show this year. I do think they're going to improve those relationships. I think that's probably one of their biggest things. But 16 coming to Xbox, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of it, and I'm being honest, 16 coming to Xbox does look good logistic-wise. I don't know if it's going to do well, but you can't expect one IP to do well. You can't expect one game of a franchise to do well. If we're consistently getting these Japanese games, they're going to sell better overall. Put Rebirth and Remake in Game Pass. Show it to a newer audience. That way, when Reunion or whatever the next Final Fantasy game's called, it's potentially going to have more sales because they played the predecessors on Game Pass. And I think that's a really good move. I don't know if that's something that they're willing to do. And I don't know if Microsoft's willing to pay for that. But I'm curious to see what goes forward when that Remake and Rebirth hit the Xbox platform. Because I do think not only is 16 coming, but I think eventually you're going to see 7 Remake and 7 Rebirth on the Xbox platform as well. But anyway, tell me what you guys think, man. Do you think Final Fantasy is one of those games that, maybe it's lost its touch? Maybe you don't necessarily need it. It'd be nice to have it, but maybe it has lost its touch. Put in that comment section below. I'm very curious to hear you guys' opinion. If you guys enjoyed this video, definitely hit that like button. It's always appreciated. You can always sub to the channel for weekly content. And follow me on Twitter at Lord Addict IOP. You could look in the description for the Addict Arena. That's my streaming channel, where we just talk about daily gaming news. We go over it as a community. We just talk about it. And we play games while we do it, man. Got to get back to the root of this. Games. Got to get back to it. But you guys have a good day. Peace. 16 comes to Xbox. I will be happy and disappointed at the same time because I didn't even beat that on PlayStation. Maybe if it came to Game Pass, I would try it on Xbox. I don't know if I would beat it, though.